So as we talk about the tapestry of love, and I try to say something that doesn't make an echo, am I okay?
Yes.
All right. I thought I heard. Anyhow, about weaving mind and spirit, I wanted to just go back to the tapestry of love that comes from that music, and the way it talks to my heart. I'm guessing it may talk to your heart as well. You know, we hear those beautiful things, the music, the chords, the words, and it touches our heart, and we know that something activates. It's the same kind of thing that in me activated when I first wandered in to a Center for Spiritual Living so many years ago and heard a message that, just like that song, activated me. And in sharing something about that today, I'm going to speak to the practitioners in the room. Now, I'm not going to speak to the uppercase practitioners. I'm going to speak to the lowercase practitioners. So what does that mean? What does that mean? You know, we have ministers here. We have Reverend Sandy and Reverend Kirk. We have Reverend Janet and Reverend Sage. We're like abundanza of ministers. Have you seen this happening? You've got homegrown Reverend John, fresh plucked from the back garden, and still continuing to sprout and flourish. And we have the uppercase practitioners, who, as you'll note, are around the room, available on Sunday for prayer treatment. And what a wonderful gift that is. But now I wanted to address everybody, because I think that's what Ernest had in mind when he was commenting on lowercase practitioners. And what did Ernest give us? He was talking about soul, actually, when he said, the subconscious or subjective is never an entity, although it acts as though it were. The creative medium is a medium only, never a person. It is necessary that we understand this, because one of the first things a practitioner, lowercase practitioner, has to do to separate the belief is to separate the belief from the believer. From the standpoint of the spiritual man, disease, poverty, unhappiness, and misery are neither person, place, nor thing. So from there, he builds up to the basis of treatment and the capacity in the practice of treatment, prayer, of knowing that divine word in our heart, that we can have realization and impact. And I really do believe that when Ernest Holmes was speaking that way, he had in mind lowercase practitioner, because I believe that as he saw the world, anyone who was born and conscious was practicing. And how? Well, listening to beautiful music and being stirred. Getting an idea to do something, whether it's of service or something that never should have been on the bucket list. In doing that, we are in the practice, every one of us. And so to me, the thing then that's interesting is that if we're in the practice and we revisit what we've heard from Ernest Holmes and the other great teachers, what do we find out? And so I'm going to try to get to a place to say something, and I'm going to also go back and recall that around the time I wandered into a Center for Spiritual Living, one of the things I remember that was on the radio, and it was on the radio before, but I particularly noted it then, was a chanteuse, Joni Mitchell, Canadian. A lot of Canadian chanteuses, but that's a topic for someone else to speak to. But she would do some interesting stuff, and I remember Both Sides Now, and her singing quite amazingly about looking at clouds, both sides now, looking at love, both sides now. And her comment, I really don't know clouds at all, And I could even from a science point of view think that clouds are kind of unusual and amazing, and I don't really have a grasp on clouds totally, even though I've got a notion. But then she said, I've looked at love from both sides now. Love's illusion. And I don't know love at all. And here was Ernest Holmes saying that love is pervasive and embedded in this divine principle, that principle is in us, and that to the extent that we're willing to say, hey, I'm a lowercase practitioner, we can participate, we can have full benefit, we can share, we can increase, we can enjoy. All we have to do is be a lowercase p practitioner of that. So then I was trying to think about how can I be persuasive that we're a lowercase p practitioner, that we're all practitioners, and the uppercase practitioners, well, those are the people that go to a class to be able to consistently share a divine word for someone else. And so that's a particular thing, and yeah, you have some shawls that are worn in some classes, but short of that, like everyone is a practitioner, eh? And I do believe that when we see things that happen, whether we like them and we have a prayer of gratitude, or we don't like them and we have a prayer for some kind of healing, I do believe that we're actually all practitioners. So then the next question that comes up to me as I muddle through this, trying to make sense of what's going on inside my head. And is it just some human thing that the homegrown guy is wrestling with, or does it connect to divine principle? Well, then I start going off and thinking about some other things that I'll share with you, and we'll see what you think about it. It did occur to me that since Ernest in his day was calling this religious science. Science was there at the caboose position on that one. Or science of mind. Oh, there, the science is the locomotive driving the mind in that particular little phrase. It had science. And the way I grew up, science was part of finding my way in the world, and I thought maybe there's a lot to science, and I spent time with that. And then here I'd wandered into a house of celebration, is what a Center for Spiritual Living was compared to a deep, dark house of worship that I knew in the Midwest. And I walked into this celebration, and science has a place, and I'm starting to wonder what that place is, and every once in a while I'm hearing some things, and now I'm looking back and I'm wondering, well, what was it that hooked me? What's going on with that? And I figured, how could I connect that together and give it relevance? And so I was thinking about the lowercase practitioner, and I was remembering workshops that I used to go to back in that time, where workshop leaders would say there's consciousness and unconsciousness and competency and incompetency, and then they'd do that grid, and I'd say, sometimes I think I'm an unconscious nincompoop. But I noted that the kind of the payoff with a lot of that was, let's become a conscious competent. Oh, okay, I get it. I want to be able to do the thing reliably in a good way and know what I'm doing. And so that's somewhat about the journey to the uppercase practitioner, or a science of mind class. So what about the rest of us? Are the rest of us competent? And the thing that came up for me is, I think so. Like if we're here, and if we're able to listen to music and smile, and if we're able to share greetings with a beloved member of our spiritual community, like we are here and we're competent, even if we don't always know how we do that. And so then I was further wondering, how important is it to actually know? And I was looking for an example of that. And I get examples in the strangest places, I'll admit it. And the one, So the one I'm going to use today, comes from what happened to me when I was visiting my dermatologist for my checkup. And, part of it relates to the whole thing about how we participate in life and things like, DNA and genetics. And some of you may remember that I once brought my genes up on stage, right, and shared those. We're not going exactly that way. But I was sitting there and I had to wait a long time, and I was all dressed, ready for my annual examination, wearing my special, they have special designer clothing at the dermatologist where it opens at the back and all that stuff, and I'm lying there waiting, and I go to a really nice dermatologist, and they've got a huge TV in every room, and they play music that's kind of classical and easy, but what they show is nature, and they had high-definition dolphins and whales swimming. And the other thing that sent me off on this bent is somebody turned on the, what do they call that? It's not the crawler, the closed, yes, they had closed captioning turned on. So part of the closed captioning said, and we sent people out into the ocean of this and the sea of that to get the creatures and their native and these dolphins and whales. And then these whales would come by, and they had the closed captioning for that. Click, click, click. And they had more clicks. And then they had the mother whale and the baby whale. And then they had moaning noise. And then in little quotations they said, mama singing to baby. I mean, this is cute stuff. And then they had the dolphins, and they're more frisky, click, click, click. And I was looking at that and watching these creatures, and then they had the whale breach. And I was just kind of wondering about that. Does the whale need to be a conscious competent in gravity to pull this off? Or do the whales are just quite competent at being whales, and they can be unconscious about it. They can just do their whale thing, right? And I took it a little further, and I was wondering, like, how does the whale get up to the surface? Does it have to, turn off participating in gravity in order to go there? And I said, no, this gravity thing works. The whales don't apparently need to be conscious, because I watched the caption, and it didn't, the whales weren't saying, keep the gravity going, this is good, or anything like that. They were singing to babies and nuzzling each other and having a good time. And so isn't it somewhat like that for us? When we see a person, a treasured friend, and we want to greet them, don't we instinctively, right? We know what to do, because we're practitioners. It's a lowercase practitioner, but we can be the practitioner for ourselves in that moment. Or if we see something that calls to our heart, that needs attention, a service opportunity, someone who is maybe dirt biking excessively and needs a loving thought and a little bit of TLC, our heart rises and we know what to do. We absolutely do. Charles Fillmore, in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, gave us this wisdom. Not a lot of science getting defined in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. Science hadn't had the rise that it found, coming into the 1900s, really. But even back then, in his time, he was saying that gravitation is the love force in nature and the power of attraction among physical bodies. So he gave a nod to the science physics thing, but he also spoke to gravitation as being the love force and what binds us and attracts us. And I do believe that although it's popular in many discussions I'm in, when science comes up, to go, like science or quantum woo-woo, or, we respect Einstein, and he's one of the 6 who's on the wall there. But you get to some of Einstein's theories, and in day-to-day discussion, I don't find much of that other than he was kind of an egghead or something like that. But the ability to practice and get the full benefit that the science that explains how it happens is real, and we can use it. We absolutely know how to use it. The whales know how to lift their babies up to the surface. I got to see that. It was beautiful. They know how to zoom up out through the top and breach and do all that stuff, just like we know how to walk along. And I've never seen anyone or heard of anyone getting confused about gravity and floating up out of their seat. No, we don't have any up there. So, I mean, like there's this stuff that works. And it's the same, I would suggest, the same reliability, consistency, and power that's in my heart, that's in your heart, when you're called to a prayer. Whether it's a prayer of appreciation or healing or safety or abundance, whatever it is, it's the same power. And now I'd like to just give a thought to what it is like to manage that. And in order to get there, the way I think about it, I like to go back and forth, inside and out, and think about it a little bit to see, what can I find out? What do I know? Where does my heart settle? So I'm going to go back to someone that I like to use once in a while for the odd quote. Coming from, it's Oscars, so we'll go to a movie. Animal crackers, and we'll take a little moment and imbibe in the wisdom of one of those brothers, Groucho Marx. I love this quote, but it took on more meaning as I was thinking about today in my message. I once shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got into my pajamas, I'll never know. And as much as it's silly, I think there's quite something, just like Joni Mitchell was talking about the clouds and love in both sides now. Look at it from both sides. What do we see? What do we know? What do we understand? And to do that, I'm actually going to take a little side trip back to why I go to the dermatologist. I mean, in general, I think my body does okay. A couple of science facts. Like medical science says, every 7 to 10 years, we replace our body. We're generating new cells, we're cleaning out the old cells, and we just do it. And I don't know anybody who ever exactly got confused. Like I think, well, if I was to get confused about doing my DNA thing, what would be the worst thing that could happen? And for me, it would be going back to the Midwest and the church I'd follow my parents to. If I turned into one of those green Jell-O molds, that would be terrifying. I think I'm much more happy being a human and having experiences and feelings and relationships than if I was to turn into that. But then you look at this task. Our body, new, every 7 to 10 years. Our human genome, 3 billion base pairs. So, it's not like I'm walking around thinking about, like mole number 237. Which base pairs do we need to do? It doesn't work that. You don't need to worry about it. I'm able to practice as a human at a level where I can visit my dermatologist, and he'll, every once in a while, rarely, but every once in a while, he'll say, that one we're going to freeze and it's going to go away because something there looks like a mistake. Deal with the mistake at that level. You don't have to be down at the level of which of the 3 billion of base pairs do I need to take out back and talk to, because the one mole went asymmetrical. Oh my goodness. Or sometimes they can just, oh, there's an error there, we can slice it off. We don't need to be consciously into all the details of it. We're very competent as a life force, participating and saturated with the divine. And a lot of the other stuff, we can absolutely treat as details, adjustments, and corrections. But now let's come back down to the root of that, and what's underneath this notion that with that lowercase p, we're all practitioners. We've all got it. We've all got that gift. And even if someone just walked in for the first time and says, I'm doubtful, I'm not sure I got that gift, or I think my divine gift was the wrong one, or broken, or mispackaged, or upside down, in some form we've all got the divine gift. And isn't it wonderful, right, to come into celebrating together, that we can just let go of the stuff that was a mistake, let go of the things that don't fit, be in our divinity, recognize what's beautiful, celebrate the divine nature that we share. So as much as I appreciate our most senior ministers and our capital P trained, and they'll do it for you anytime you might want a loving hand, a loving word, capital uppercase practitioners, I think the more interesting and important thing is lowercase p practitioner. We are all divine practitioners. It's our work, it's our word. It's why we're here. It's the journey. And to me, that's the really good thing, and why I'm always happy to share being part of InSpirit. That is beyond the icing on the cake. It's what makes it all so worthwhile. Another one that has a little bit of science in it that comes from Ernest Holmes, and I kind of like, talking about soul again. And here he does talk about ether, which was a theory at the time Ernest was writing and speaking. And, ether as a science thing, and the way he said it kind of got disproved by some people, Morley and Michelson. That's what scientists do. They prove things, they disprove things, they're rascals. So just as the ether of space is a medium for physical action, so the universal subjectivity is the medium for mental action. I think Ernest nailed it on that one. Anything that has ever been thought at any time in the history of man exists today in a subjective state in universal mind. When we get into the field of mind, there is no past, present, or future. They merge into one medium, one unity, spirit. So I'd like you to join me just now and imagine some goal or achievement or something you're holding in your heart, and just right where you are, if you will, close your eyes and just see yourself in that achievement, in that expression, in that capability. Just hold that in your mental sense, in your heart, and know that in doing that, you're a practitioner, and you are creating that future. It's in your power. And then if we bring that back a moment, so that is why we have classes. We'll have, starting this Tuesday or next Tuesday, foundations class, and of doing a little bit more practice to put a boost on your sense and connection of how you exist as a practitioner. Think about stopping by. It's a small and simple thing that at the end leads to people doing creative projects that quite often open up new vistas for where they can take this experience of life. Because we all are practitioners. We all have that power. Yeah, there's stuff that's out there, like the whales were out there and the dolphins were out there. But there's also the stuff that's right here. It always was. And here we come together and we walk right into it and find it. And that's what brings us together. That's what makes this so divine and wonderful. I'm going to finish with an exclamation point, not an explanation point. I've needed those, an exclamation point that comes out of someone who teaches A Course in Miracles. Happens to be a quote from A Return to Love, Marianne Williamson, who said, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." Powerful beyond measure. So in that sense of wisdom, I'd like you to just join me in embracing power beyond measure, the gift in our hearts to know love, to know beauty, to share comfort, to sense the need for service, to hold a prayer in our hearts that heals and transforms, to be the healing presence for people when they're bruised, broken, or lost, to know the potential that comes with us as human practitioners of love, to hold in our hearts, revealing a world of reconciliation, harmony, and opportunity. I know that that is the power, that is the divine gift, and that is the prayer, whether it's lifted in music or lifted in the conscious choice to pray for good and to support the manifestation of God. I release it and activate it for all of us as we say together, and so it is.